If not, I can go to mine in my house. Here, I'll do that. Stand by.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I had to get the recording going and was doing a couple things, so here we go.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the
United States of America,
and to the republic
for which
for which
it
it
stands,
stands,
one
nation, under God,
indivisible, with
liberty.
liberty and justice for all. Any luck with Cindy, Dina?
She is here.
Oh,
Yes,
super.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, let's go ahead and have a roll call, please.
All right, Director Yesney,
Here.
Director Russell,
Here.
Director Farnsworth,
Here.
Director Webb,
Here.
Director Murphy.
Here.
All right, very good. And now we'll open the meeting. This is a public meeting for the budget hearing. We'll open it to anybody from the public who's here who wants to speak, and it's the opportunity for you to speak to the board of directors for a maximum. We'll have 30 minutes maximum to speak, and 3 minutes will be allotted to each speaker. I know that RJ Pilcher, I believe you signed up to speak. And
yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Great. So RJ, if you would like to be the first one, please feel free.
Okay, this is RJ Pilcher, 87842 Sandra Street, Florence, Oregon, 97439. Unfortunately, the budget process this year has been brought forward with less clarity and candor than it was last year. Whether it was a general fund beginning fund balance, the projected capital replacement needs chart, PERS UAL, or the WLFIA budget as a whole, all addressed in my written comments forwarded to you. I've been told that the only individual in WLFIA that has responsibility to the board is Chief Schick. All other employees report to the chief. That means that every number that has been brought forward or omitted in the budget process is the chief's and the chief's alone. In my opinion, the chief has a lot of explaining to do, so I hope that the board chooses to ask the tough questions. I find it equally unfortunate that Director Yesney went to the WLFIA budget meeting and voted against the wishes of the budget committee, which passed budget number 2 by an 8-2 margin. I urge the board to approve budget committee's approved 2021 budget with the adjustment of unappropriated ending fund balance being adjusted to $1,399,713 and PERS UAL account increased to $450,000. These numbers are in Chief Schick's latest budget that I received June 9th. In my opinion, the chief can find money in the bloated material and services portion of the WLFIA budget to satisfy the personal contractual obligations that he, Ops House, and Office Manager McClure are due that he neglected to set forth in the original WLFIA budget number 2. Do not approve the proposed WLFIA 2021 budget because it has long-ranging consequences for the district, which should be addressed in special session before any vote should be taken. In conclusion, it is easy to say money is no object when you're using somebody else's money. I want to remind the board that your fiduciary responsibility is to the ratepayers that entrust you with their hard-earned money to provide a service that they cannot provide themselves. The employees have a union to look after them. They don't need your help. The ratepayers need your help. Each year, the ratepayers give you more and more. You are budgeting 4.21% increase in tax revenue this year over last. If you were going to your own checkbook to run this district, I believe that you would have an entirely different view, and that is the view that ratepayers like myself are looking for you to have. Do the right thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, RJ. Does anybody else who's out there wish to speak?
Hey, Rick, just to let you know, RJ had sent some documents that we emailed to all the directors as well.
Okay. So we should probably make those part of the written minutes of the meeting, if Mr.
Yeah, we can do that.
so wish. Okay.
Yeah, we can do
Okay. Any other public comment? All right. Hearing none, we will close the public hearing, and we will entertain the budget. I'd like to turn it over to Chief Schick to lead us through the documents that are attached tonight.
Thanks, Rick.
Which documents are we talking about? Because I don't have anything to look at.
Should be on board, your onboard packet.
I've got on board and I don't have any meeting for tonight. And
Can you send that to Director Farnsworth? I had the same problem. I thought it was just me, but we'll send you.
I printed it.
Yeah.
I printed it from onboard, so.
Well, I don't have it.
I couldn't find the meeting either. There was some kind of problem.
We must have a glitch in onboard because some people are seeing it and some people are not. So I am going to forward the packet that I sent to Director Yesney to all of you right now. Do you want it personal email or district email? Which works better?
Personal for me.
Yes. You can send it to both because I'm trying to multitask on 2 different devices.
I'll just send it to both.
Okay.
I can also share it on the screen.
Okay, that would be a good idea. I mean, I have the upcoming board meeting, but not tonight's meeting. I don't know how that could happen.
It showed up in my onboard.
I
So can
haven't
everybody,
sent it to you.
everybody see the board packet?
I have it
Yep.
now, yes. Mm-hmm.
Are we ready to start, or everybody want to wait until they get their emails, or?
I'm ready.
Oh, okay.
I'm good.
Okay.
Okay, let's go. We're good.
So I want to go to page 3, which I will see if I can make this smaller. There we go. So the budget starts on page 3 of your board packet, or you can see it on your screen. And when I say page 3, it's at the board packet page number on the lower right hand of each page. And what you're seeing there on page 3 is the budget summary, including the numbers approved by the Western Lane Budget Committee. And that would be in the 3rd column from the right, and it's labeled Approved 2020, 2021. And next to that, you will see a column labeled Proposed by WLFIA. That's proposed by the WLFIA Board of Directors. And in that column, you'll see that there are 2 minor changes, which are highlighted in yellow. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. This is just the summary page, and we'll look at more detailed description of these changes in just a minute on a separate page. But essentially, just to summarize, we have decreased materials and services by approximately $25,000, and then added that same amount back to contingency. The reason we had to do that was, if you recall, SCFR and Western Lane Ambulance Budget Committees approved different budgets for the Western Lane Fire and EMS Authority, and this will all tie together here. In order to resolve the difference, the Authority Board of Directors met, and they approved a compromise budget for WLFIA. And this compromise has been approved by SCFR Board of Directors, and now we're going to present it tonight to the Western Lane Board of Directors. So if we go to page 13, we get more detail. Oops, there we go. So the primary reduction that we made in the WLFIA budget was to remove the Fire Operations Chief / Training Chief position that's in line 2. We had originally discussed sharing a training officer between both districts. And then we decided not to do that and changed that line item to a Fire Operations Chief position, which is open now since Chief Dickerson left a couple months ago. But in an attempt to cut costs for both districts, I am comfortable with leaving the training chief position and the fire ops chief positions open. Training right now is being run very well at the coordinator level for both agencies. And Matt's doing a fantastic job as operations chief for both departments. I'm personally very comfortable with Matt continuing on as the combined operations chief. And the SVFR board has also voiced their support of having him continue in that position as well. Other changes that you see in yellow there are some benefiting increases, which I know have been concerned to the Western Lane Board. However, these changes were approved by the WLFIA Board of Directors. So those are the only changes from the budget approved by the Western Lane Budget Committee. And with all that, I know we're going to have discussion, but we're requesting the board approve resolution found on page 2 of your board packet with the additions of those changes to materials and services and contingencies as suggested by the WLFIA Board of Directors. Back to you, Rick.
So, Chief, just to be clear, the resolution currently is the budget adopted by the Budget Committee, correct?
Correct. That is correct.
Okay.
So we would have to include that in the motion to accept the changes proposed by the WLFIA Board of Directors.
Okay. So I wonder if we just, we have a budget approved by the Budget Committee, and I wondered if it might be best to kind of go around the room for the directors and see what their thoughts are, or if there's any other thoughts on potential changes to the Budget Committee's approved budget. So I'm going to go down the roster of participants here in the order I have them, and Director Murphy, would you have any comments?
I have a question. In this document that we're looking at for approval tonight, it shows the contingency at $552,234 on page 3. And I don't remember how we got there, because in the document that was proposed and I believe adopted at the Budget Committee level showed a contingency of $350,000.
I can answer that. I believe that Director Yesney requested an additional $150,000 to be taken out of the unappropriated ending fund balance and added to contingency. That was approved by the Budget Committee.
So then you got $52,234 from somewhere else?
That's from here.
I think the WFIA's amounts $24,870, isn't it?
No.
Since there were a couple of different budgets proposed to the Budget Committee, the budget number 1, between budget number 1 and budget number 2 for WLFIA, there was a $52,234 difference between them. So since the Budget Committee approved budget 2 instead of budget 1, we added the difference of $52,234 to contingency.
Thank you, Dina.
You're welcome.
Any other requests or thoughts, Director Murphy?
No, I just think in this process, I believe the prudent and the correct thing to do would be to vote on the budget presented from the Budget Committee to this hearing first, if we do anything, sir.
Okay. Okay.
That's all I have.
You're not making a motion yet, are you, John?
Nope, I'm not doing nothing.
Okay. I'm going to go down the list and Director Farnsworth.
Well, I have a variety of concerns. Our Budget Committee members and our board voted 6-2 to accept WFIA budget number 2. And to remind you, WFIA budget number 2 was very similar to what we're looking to ask from our rank and file staff. And I think it's illegitimate for us to be a part of WFIA and to have our staff, administrative staff, having benefits that are dissimilar from our rank and file staff. And I think the sentiment that was shared about budget number 2 wasn't just the number at the bottom. It was the individual priorities and line items in that budget that were important to us. And that's why we voted for budget number 2. What I'm discouraged about is, Chief, when you didn't get what you wanted, you changed the argument and went to budget number 3, which is illegitimate. Our budget committee never saw budget number 3. And I also think there was no sentiment among the Western Lane Ambulance Board to approve the fire ops chief training position. That was never going to happen. We're looking at having Matt over there as a test, about 6 months. We'll evaluate at that time. But we're pretty happy with the training situation we have now. So to create a third budget, an end run, if you will, to foster greater benefit levels on the WFIA staff is illegitimate because it was never vetted or looked at by the budget committee for Western Lane Ambulance District. What should have happened is WFIA's budget should have been presented to both boards long before our budgets were being individually vetted, and that would have been incumbent and included in there. Instead, it was done after the fact. And the other part that was disturbing is that it was very, very late in the budget process that it was divulged to us that 3 members of our administrative staff have contracts giving them 100% healthcare coverage. Why wasn't that brought up early in the game? Why was that not included in the information or the calculations? I mean, surely those who are preparing the budget must know what they have in their contracts. I think it's fair to ask why the budget committee didn't learn about that until the very last moments of the process. Now, this budget also includes a capital budget. And may I share my screen, please?
You should have. Dina, you might have to do that. You should be able to.
Okay, one moment.
So I don't see how I can do that.
I turned it to anybody can share.
Okay, one moment here. Let me click on sharing my screen here. Okay. Budget committee member Pilcher has sent us this capital replacement needs spreadsheet today. Now, I don't know how this spreadsheet was prepared. I assumed it was done in an Excel spreadsheet, but it turns out that the math throughout this spreadsheet is entirely wrong. This is what was given our budget committee. You can see down below in yellow, those are the real numbers. So whatever numbers were typed in here weren't part of any formulation. And I recall Director Webb saying we'd work our way down to a minimum of say 400,000 in our capital fund. And yet we're going to be at 208,774. So I thought, well, I better check this. So I ran an Excel spreadsheet and these numbers are accurate. So it wasn't 319,284, it's 208,774. That's $110,000. Now, I don't recall anyone seriously taking up my suggestion that we use the average need number in our budget. Our average need, according to this calculation, is 182,000. I suspect it's closer to 195, but the point is this spreadsheet that was given to the budget committee was wholly inaccurate. The other thing that we've had during the budget cycle is, as RJ has pointed out, is we had a beginning fund balance that started out at like $1 million and then went up to 2.1 million. Where's the math for that? I haven't seen any math for that. I mean, I I
We
think,
explained that, Director Farnsworth, with the audit report coming out late. And that was, we apologized for that and we corrected it.
okay, but I understand, but my point is, a beginning fund balance, you don't need an auditor to figure that out.
No, but I had gotten instructions from Kathy Taylor on how to figure out that number. And with the number I was given, I did those calculations. As I said, it was inaccurate and I corrected it.
Okay, so my suggestion would be that going forward, that we have some kind of a schedule or mini budget or something, because it lacks credibility when it changes by $1 million. And I understand you're doing your best, but that's another example where the budget committee was given differing numbers going forward. Now, this particular budget we're looking at, if you remember, we started out looking at this chart. This chart is with $300,000 going to PERS unfunded liability. And as we can all see here, our revenue falls below expenses and there's no correction. This one is with nothing going to PERS. So yes, we have some money in the bank, but our long-term prospects for this district are not good, not from a revenue expense standpoint. We have looked constantly at the idea that a well-managed organization would have our personnel services as a percentage of revenue be maxed at 70%. Well, we're at 78%, and the prospect is that that will only go higher. So I find it very difficult to accept a new budget from the chief that would have benefits and increases for the staff that our regular rank and file folks don't enjoy. So I have great reservations about this budget. I'm unhappy about the way it was put together. I'm unhappy about the fact that we haven't faced up to the capital budget properly. And I think that the WFIA changes that were adopted, if they're adopted tonight by our board, I suppose that makes them legitimate, but I don't like the fact that we'd be subsidizing the staff based on WFIA. So let's back up a little bit. We're supposed to be a joint agency with a common chief, but we're getting less than an equal amount of say in the process. This process is being driven from the SVFR side, and it needs to be equally driven from both sides. So I think that the WFIA number 3 budget is illegitimate. I think we should vote on the budget as it was with WFIA budget number 2. And I think we should properly fund our capital budget based on the new math that we've seen in this spreadsheet. That's my input.
Okay, thank you. I show Director Russell next.
I have reservations about the third budget also for WLFIA, but I have a different kind of reservation on it. We've asked Matt to step up and do 2 jobs, and we're paying him for 1. I don't really agree with increasing pay because it's contractual. There's a lot of corporations out there where the management, the administration staffs are willingly taking cuts in their own pay, offering it back, even though they're contractually supposed to be getting raises. I think that's something that WLFIA could look at. I feel like I'm concerned about PERS, but I don't want it to be such a concern that it's the driving force of everything in the world. I can't see the state walking in and saying, we need this money now from you and pay up or get out, because they can't provide the services that we provide. So if we have to not put as much in the PERS account to set it aside, then in order to keep the district going, then that's what we have to do. That's all.
Okay. Is that it, Director Russell?
Yeah.
Okay, Director Webb.
I have a quick question on the WFIA budget. The dollar amount for the health and dental went up from an approved 71,000 to 108. What was the difference on that? What caused that increase?
That
What
would
is it?
be-
Which line?
It's in the health and dental category. Last year's budget was 125. This year's lower than last year, but it's significantly higher than what we were working with on the approved budget. What's the difference on that? Different plan, or what are we looking at?
I'll let Dina answer that.
What
Go
page
ahead.
are you on?
I'm on the WAFIA budget, so I'm on
Page 13.
line 13.
13? Okay.
Yeah. Now, I assume it's just a different plan, but
I think it's continuing the same plan since we don't have a contract with the unions yet. We have to continue the benefits they have now. I
okay.
think, I don't want to get into negotiations, but
But from
we're
a
hoping
budgetary,
that'll change. Yeah.
so from a budgetary standpoint, you have to continue that. I'll buy into that. I'm also concerned that we're undercompensated, both Matt and Chief, and I think it would be, if we vote to approve this budget, I think it would be wise to do a survey and see where we are as far as the competitive pay scale for you two. Asking Matt to do an awful lot right now, and he's done it. So I have no issues with that. And I think Chief is doing a good job. So that's where I stand. Other than that, I don't have any concerns. I'm kind of with Cindy on the PERS thing. I'm not quite sure how putting today's dollars into a PERS side account with no real benefit from that side account, we're not earning any money on it. We're not getting an offset from the state. I don't know if that's doing today's taxpayer any good. I think it's a waste of money, to be honest with you. I think we should be deploying that more into people working within our district rather than into a PERS side account that just sits there. That's all I got to say.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to address just a few things on the WLFIA budget. Of course, I voted for that with my WLFIA hat on. And really, if you look at the formation of WLFIA, it's really set up to be, and the words that are used actually in the resolution are coordinated and efficient. And I see combining the having the same fire chief, the same EMS ops chief, the same office manager over both entities as being coordinated, being more coordinated, and the staff, there's redundancy with the staff. Deleting the training chief job, we're now down to actually a lower budget that we're proposing tonight than was approved in budget number 2 by our budget committee. And I feel that that's efficient, eliminating that position. We're down to 5.5 FTEs in WLFIA. And that gives us a chief, an ops chief, an office manager, and support staff. And I think when you've got, that's pretty thin and pretty efficient. So we do not have a salary survey. The only survey I've seen shows that chief is significant, was done 2 years ago and did the office manager position and the chief's position. Shows that chief is significantly under median 2 years ago and our office manager is at median. So without a salary survey, I think it's premature to move on any kind of cuts in those areas. And as Director Farnsworth's charts show, I also feel like we've got a lot of work to do financially looking ahead. Next year, if you look at that chart, it stays pretty close to revenues and expenses, but it starts separating significantly after next year. So we do have a lot of work left ahead of us. But I felt good about this proposal. I do agree there's a lot of process changes that we can make, we can do better. Remember, WLFIA wasn't started till October of last year, so we are in our infancy of going forward with this process. So I could still stick with and approve certainly the revised budget by WLFIA. I think it's appropriate at this point in time. And I think we do need to commit as a board to that long-range strategic plan with our community and our providers as soon as possible next fiscal year, so we can get all this out of the way before we get to the budget process. I know several of you have mentioned that. So that's kind of where I sit on this. Would anybody like to make any kind of a move for any kind of adoption here? Or do we want further discussion?
Well, I would recommend that we adopt the budget as proposed with budget number 2, WFIA budget number 2, and that we move forward with that. We have plenty of funds in contingency that, depending upon the results of collective bargaining, we can make adjustments and we can do salary surveys at a later time, right along with our strategic planning. So my suggestion is to do that, but I'd also like to see us put a proper amount in our capital fund account because we've seen the math doesn't add up. So I think we need to address both issues. I agree with Director Yesney that we do need to do evaluations across the organization. But doing pay raises and that sort of thing and keeping benefits higher while we're also going and entertaining our rank and file, I don't think is fair or right. So I would suggest that we stick with budget number 2, WFIA budget number 2, and we adopt the budget and we complete that strategic planning and then make the adjustments that are needed, not do it backwards. And I'd like to see a proper amount. I'd like to see the $186,000 put in the capital budget. Otherwise, we're just running it empty.
Are you want to make both those in the same motion? Or do you want to do separate?
Those are 2 separate motions.
Okay. So let's take the first motion, which would be to approve the 2021 budget as approved or approved by the budget committee. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
Okay, do we have a second? John, if you said something, you're on mute.
I would second that since I believe we ought to vote on it, Mr. Chairperson.
Okay. Further discussion. I have a question for Chief. Chief, if this doesn't agree again with WFIA and with Siuslaw Valley Fire and Rescue, how does that work? What's the consequence?
So the WFIA board would set wages and benefits for WFIA employees. Now, if Western Lane wants to pay a different amount, again, the WFIA board would meet to try and reach a compromise. Both boards could meet and try and reach a compromise. After that, it would go to a mediator.
And so what happens July 1?
If what?
If we don't have an agreement on a dollar amount.
A WFIA board would set the wages and benefits for the WFIA employees.
Okay.
May I comment, Mr. Rick?
Yes.
Why wouldn't it be if Western Lane Ambulance adopts a budget with X amount of dollars for WFIA, Siuslaw Valley Fire adopts a budget with X amount of dollars for WFIA, WFIA has to operate within the monies allotted?
I think we could do that because I think the agreement, and well, tell me if I'm wrong, it's a 51-49 split, but I think that's for the first year and can be negotiated after that first year.
That's correct.
So I think we could do that.
I think that's a good way to go forward. And then next year, we'll put the WFIA budget in front of the 2 boards before we do our individual budgets.
So, just to be really clear, if Western Lane approves a high, in this case, it would be higher funding than the 51-49 split, the WFIA board through Chief is going to have the ability to use those funds between the 2 districts to meet the needs of both districts. We're not going to tie line items down in the budget for WFIA from the board level.
Well, I think our board has to have an answer about the fire ops training chief. So in reality, we're looking at budget number 2 that we approved, but we're also saying that our board needs to be asked for approval if they're going to fill the fire ops chief training position. If Wafia is just going to take the 792,000 and pay Wafia employees and defeat what we are saying needs to be in the individual line items, then what's the point of this vote?
The way I read it, if you do it on this, the way I read it, if you vote on budget number 2, you are approving that ops, the right to do the training officer.
Now that would be wrong, because then we would also be saying that Matt is a permanent fixture between the 2 districts, and we all decided that we would look at that for a 6-month period. So let's not make a policy statement with a budget. You know,
but we're appropriating the money to do so, and by doing, you are essentially making that statement. So I won't support going on to vote for that. I would prefer to vote for the exclusion of the fire ops chief at this time. So,
well, I would think that would be a gross misuse of the budget authority to continue to take the money from the fire ops chief and float the benefits for the staff, because that's not the intent here. The intent is to bring equity to our rank and file staff. And if Wafia defeats that, then we don't have any business being part of Wafia.
And Mr. Chair?
Yes.
And Larry, I understand what you're saying. And in the question I raised, if Western Lane gives them X amount of dollars and Siuslaw Valley gives them X amount of dollars and they have one lump sum, it is not up to me to how Wafia spends that money.
I understand your point.
I mean, that's all I got to say.
So we're either going to give them 792,000 or 744,000, and the chief can spend that money any way he wishes and present an unfair picture to our rank and file on the Western Lane ambulance side.
Well, I think you're painting an inaccurate picture, Larry. I mean,
I want to know exactly what we're talking about.
Let me finish, please. We have a former Western Lane employees who had a different benefit package than the SVFR employees had. So you're stating that all employees need to have the Western Lane benefit package, which is not fair to the SVFR employees. So we went to the Western Lane Fire and EMS Authority Board, and they decided that was going to be this benefit package. I don't think Western Lane Board of Directors can specify the wages and benefits for SVFR, and I don't think they can specify wages and benefits for Wellfia employees. That's the Wellfia Board of Directors' sole responsibility.
Which we should have done before the budgets were presented. This is backwards.
But it's where we are now.
Yes, we are.
A point of fact, though, the budget obligation for Western Lane is 1/2 or 51% of the 744 or the 792, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Well, plus the 100,000 for other services.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, I really don't think we have closure or agreement on that
No,
issue.
we don't. And what I regret is that that the argument hadn't been changed on us. We should have been voting at Wafia on budget number 1 or budget number 2, and both directors should have voted for budget number 2 as instructed by our board and budget committee. And then we should have had a negotiation with the other board to decide what the happy ground would be. Instead, we're doing this backwards. So it is awkward, it is difficult, but I think that we never were going to fund the fire ops chief. We were never going to do that. So to take that money and make us spend it, $50,000 on benefits for the staff, which will not apply to our rank and file, is just flat unfair.
That is absolutely untrue. We were going to replace Jim Dickerson. The decision was made to see if Matt could do it for both agencies. It was always our intent
Well, we're
to
still
replace
looking at
Jim
that.
Dickerson.
We're still looking at that. Yeah.
And option number 1 was voted on by Siuslaw Valley with the higher pay and benefits rates. So
I have one more.
Director Murphy. Yes, Director Murphy.
You know, we are not going to solve in this budget hearing shoulda, coulda, woulda, or the past. The only thing I believe, I might not agree with what has happened or how we got there, but I have to vote tonight on, am I gonna pay 51% of 792, 788? Or am I gonna pay 51% of 744, 023 this year? And this year only. And next year we come up with a better process for our three-headed snake, because thank God operations is doing their job with 3 dysfunctional boards that are not working together. So that's my decision solely is going to be based on money tonight. That's all I've got to say.
Okay.
What percentage is it a difference between the two, budget 2 and budget 3 for Wellfia?
You mean dollar amount or
Percentage.
percentage of what? I don't
The
understand.
difference between budget 2 and budget 3, the one that you presented to Wellfia board, what is the percentage of difference? The reason I'm asking is I've learned from John that once you approve a budget, you can change it within, what is it, John, 10 or 15% without having to go in and change your budget. So if the difference is between 10 and 15%, it really doesn't matter because you could go in and change your budget to adapt whatever needs to be done, correct?
So you're asking for the 790 and 750. What's the difference there?
Yes.
No, the original Wellfia budget by SFR was higher than either one of these.
Right.
Western Lane Ambulance District approved the lower number, that's the 792, and the Wellfia board approved a compromise, which was in between. Well, it was actually less.
But Cindy is asking the percentage difference between 792, 788, and the 744, 023. And I think she's asking the percentage difference in the 51% we pay.
Well, maybe the easy
I think
way.
it's 6%.
Yeah, I think it's within the 10%.
Yeah, it's about 6%.
So isn't it a moot point which one we vote on, because that Wellfia board still has the right to adjust their budget accordingly to what they need within the 10%.
Well, as long as it doesn't exceed what's been appropriated by the SCFR and Western Lane boards.
Right. Each of the 2 boards would have the right to amend by 10%. And I think that could happen.
And we are going to have to, depending on how negotiations work out, there's likely to be some changes in these numbers.
But once again, if we approve the budget that has the WFIA 792, 788, Western Lane Ambulance District not have the say-so how they spend that. So if I approve 792, 788, I'm basically giving them $48,000 more or so to spend wherever they want.
You're correct, John. Other than on the Wellfia board are 2 Western Lane Ambulance District board members. So you do
I understand that, but I don't have a vote in how WFIA spends their money.
Correct.
Right. But you have 2 board members that will have a say.
Right. I understand that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to approve the budget as approved by the budget committee. Any more discussion?
That's my first motion, right? What we're voting on?
Right.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And you have a second motion as well. So hearing no more discussion, I'd like to call for a roll call vote, please.
Director Yesney,
No.
Director Russell,
No.
Director Farnsworth,
No.
Director Webb,
No.
Director Murphy.
No.
Okay, Director Farnsworth, you had a second motion. I think we ought to entertain that one
Right.
first.
So let me share my screen again. And we'll pop the spreadsheet up here. Bear with me for a second. This was that capital budget that needed a little work. So as you look at the numbers here at the bottom, the ending balance, you can see it tracks and it gets all the way down to 208,774. So my motion is to properly fund the capital budget. You know, I'm looking for something more than 120,000 because that doesn't get it done. 182,000 would keep the balance up at 837.74. Now that's certainly my preference because I believe we should have a building fund as well. I can't imagine that we won't build another garage or have to put a roof on our building. So I would like to have us increase the capital fund reserve. You know, I'll throw out a number. How about 160,000?
Okay, so there's a motion to increase. Let me get to that line item. Currently has 120,000. Line number 28, capital outlay transfer from 120,000 to 160,000. Do we have a second? I'll second that motion to move it on to discussion. So further discussion?
Yes, if we make that 160,000, my first question is that for this year only? Are we looking for 160,000 across the board through 28, 29? That's my first question. And if we do put $160,000 in there, and if we only spend 120, that means we carry 40 over to next year. And that gives us 200,000, but we're still short of the projected 225,000. Then what do we do?
Yeah, I would throw my 2 cents in. First of all, John, I think this is a 1 year. This is only affects 1 year. It's this year's budget, right? So it's coming year. So and after that, I think frankly it's hard to look out more than 3 to 5 years on any kind of projection anyway. This definitely has a downward slope, but I think getting past 3 to 5 years is really difficult to predict what's going to go on. And I'm glad, Matt, that this has been put together. We have not had a really clear capital budget layout like this. I'm sorry that maybe the math didn't quite work, but it still looks directional to me. So I say that's the 1 year deal. We need to,
one error in that is that district MIH car, that 30,000, that's grant funded. It's not coming out of our capital. So if you added that into, I don't know who did the calculations down there, but that would make those calculations incorrect.
Okay, well, you can see my spreadsheet on my screen. I've changed the number to 160,000. You know, does the board have a feeling for how much they want to have in the fund? Because just substituting 160,000 every year gets us to 568. It's still a decline of $300,000.
I just want to settle this year's budget, and then we can have good discussions on the following years.
Okay.
I didn't see any. I don't see your changes there.
Well, do you see my Excel spreadsheet?
I see. Yeah, I see an Excel spreadsheet.
So what I've got is the average transfer is 160,000 on here. I changed it from 120. So
what I'm looking at says 120 still.
Okay, well, your screen hasn't refreshed or something. I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm looking at my Excel spreadsheet. If you go back to, let's see.
Did you share the new one, Larry?
I'm sorry?
Did you share the new one?
I thought so. Let me stop share and I'll put the new one up there. Hold on a second.
Happened.
Bear with me for a second.
While you're doing that, I would agree with Chief that that 30,000 is going to come out of the MIH program. And we budgeted that exactly that amount for a vehicle for the MIH program to taking a vehicle away from Western Lane Ambulance District employees. So you're looking at that capital outlay plan of about 195,000 versus what it was 225
Yeah.
off the top of my head.
And I agree with that, but I also know that we're going to have capital needs that are not on your schedule. So those capital needs could crop up, just like this year we had 48,000 for IT. There's going to be things that come up. And so our board has to get to a comfort level with how much we want to draw down on this capital budget. So I'm just saying that the 120,000 isn't sufficient year to year. What number is sufficient year to year? This shows 160,000 keeps us above $500,000. You know, I could change that to 150,000 if you'd like to see that modeling.
Well, it's a 1 year request right now, right? I mean, we could rerun this next year and update it for building and all kinds of things and change.
I mean, I really do think that any organization, HOA, you name it, you should have a schedule like this. And I think it's great that Matt put it together. I just don't know how the math came out. And we were looking at it in total. If you want to say, okay, next year we're going to really look at this schedule and figure out two things. One is, how much are we going to have as our minimum? Are we going to have a building capital fund in addition to an equipment fund? And how much will we put there in every year? I think we should have this schedule cover, you know, unanticipated things that will come up that are capital as well.
And Larry, I think you are 100% right. And I think we'll have really good discussions in our strategic planning around those issues.
Okay. Thank you.
So Director Farnsworth, still the motion is for 160,000, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Personally, I think the 180 or the $840,000 we currently have in the equipment reserve is more than ample for anything we could potentially have coming down our pike. The initial plan to have a building reserve fund was when we were going to build a building. And the way that we would have funded that building was truly with a general obligation bond. So we would have gone to the taxpayers for that as a special tax anyway. You can't fund a $5 million building out of a capital reserve fund, nor should you. I would rather put the money into people. I think our needs right now, we have more needs for people within our district and more FTEs on the ground because of the call volume that we currently have. And if we're putting money into capital reserve that we don't have an immediate need for, I think we are shooting ourselves in the foot and doing a disservice to the district. That's what I've got to say.
Does the motion say where the money's coming from?
No, we'd have to find some place to fund it from. Maybe it has to come out. Well,
What question, Chairman Yesney?
Yes.
Are we questioning where the $160,000 is going to come from? Is that what you were asking?
The 40,000.
With the $40,000 difference.
Oh, it has to come out of the capital reserve fund.
Well, I believe Director Farnsworth is made a motion to transfer 160,000 out of the general fund. So we have to find that $40,000 somewhere. Something else will have to decrease.
Probably contingency would be the best place to pull it from, since we had an increase in contingency from
I could support that.
The other part.
Okay.
So I'll amend my motion that we take the money from contingency and put it in the capital fund, and then we'll revisit this schedule. And thank you, Matt, for putting it together. Sorry the math didn't work out, but it's a great idea.
Oh, this is both Chief and myself. It wasn't just me. I just did the 10-year plan of what we need in operations. So where it comes to the math, it was, I think both Chief and I were looking at it.
Okay. Well, that's a great thing to have. So thank you.
You bet.
Okay, so the motion is to increase capital outlay to $160,000 or $40,000 to $160,000, that $40,000 to come out of contingency.
And do you amend your second, Director Yesney?
Pardon?
Do you amend your second to match that?
Yes, I will. Thank you. Thanks. Forgot about that. So I think if we're ready, let's have a roll call vote, please.
Director Yesney,
I'm going to say no just because I think we're well funded right now and would like to keep that contingency at the level that it's at.
Director Russell,
No.
Director Farnsworth,
Yes.
Director Webb,
No.
Director Murphy.
No.
Okay. So right now the budget is, we haven't changed anything at this point. Need to entertain another motion if you want to move on to a different budget.
Director Yesney, John
Yep.
Murphy, I would make a motion that we approve budget for the year of 2020 to 2021 to include the proposed by WFIA budget.
I'd second that.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Open for discussion. Okay, hearing none, let's do a roll call vote, please.
Director Yesney,
Yes.
Director Russell,
Yes.
Director Farnsworth,
No.
Director Webb,
Yes.
Director Murphy.
Yes.
Okay, we have adopted, approved a budget. We will need to change the resolution.
Yes, we'll do that.
Pardon?
We will do that, yes.
Okay. But we have to, don't we have to also adopt the resolution? We need an action item. to do
Resolution
that.
with, yeah, with those changes.
Okay. I would entertain a motion for resolution 2020-3, including the changes to the proposed, to the budget as adopted.
I'll propose that.
Who was
I'll
that?
sec-
I did.
Director Farnsworth? Okay, and a second?
Cindy Russell seconds.
Director Russell? Okay, any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Director Yesney,
Yes.
Director Russell,
Yes.
Director Farnsworth,
Yes.
Director Webb,
Yes.
Director Murphy.
Yes.
Okay, thank you all. I know
Well,
that's.
Rick, wait a minute, Mr. Director Yesney.
Yes.
I think we have to pass a resolution for the tax rate.
That's in the resolution, John?
Okay.
Yeah, you're right, John. We do that in the budget meeting, don't we? The budget committee, we have a separate one. But this one's contained in the resolution.
Well, it wasn't read into the record.
Would you like to do that?
I don't have it, is why I asked.
Okay. Yeah, it's part of the resolution. So it's 0.3198 per thousand
Okay.
permanent, 0.45 per thousand local tax. It's listed in.
Thank you. As long as we're legal is all I care about.
Okay. Thanks, John.
We all agree it happened.
Yes, it did happen.
I will make the numbers adjustments to the resolution and invite Director Yesney and Director Russell in to sign it.
Okay. Future business, we do have the board practice assessment section on the 25th on Thursday at 4 o'clock, and that's scheduled, I believe, for 90 minutes. prior to our joint meeting at 6 o'clock the same night. And with that, if there's nothing else to be brought forward related to the budget, I believe we're going to be adjourned.
Goodbye.
Good night,
All
everyone.
right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.